Hello everybody! Who wants another off-the-cuff rant? Not entirely off the cuff this time. I had to speak to quite a few people before making this video and I took some notes, but still, this is a video that I just felt like should be made, and I also know that nobody's going to make it besides me. So here I am. I actually wanted to make this video a considerable amount of time ago, and I was sort of convinced by a lot of good arguments from people that I actually know and trust to not do it because my arguments were a bit too weak. But after having just returned from another NAMM show 2 weeks ago, I feel like now this video is definitely warranted. So you read the title, you saw the thumbnail. This video is about why purchasing a booth at the NAMM show is not worth it. Now, most of you watching this will not even be the target audience technically, because you don't run guitar companies, you don't run amp companies, or any company that might exhibit at the NAMM show. But this might be interesting to you, so I do recommend sticking around. If this video was exclusively made for people who might attend the show as exhibitors, then it would get 300 views. This past NAMM show, 2025, was my third one. I went the 2 years before then. 2023 was still sort of a COVID recovery NAMM. That had been, I believe, the first show since 2020, and it had been shoved from January to April and shortened from 4 days to 3. And then last year in 24, they went back to the usual date in January and also back to 4 days. And this year, a lot of stuff was different. Mainly the fact that they did shorten it back from 4 to 3 days, and I saw something that I hadn't seen in the 2 shows prior because it wasn't there. And that is the NAMM show basement. Now, this basement at past shows, like 2019, whatever, anytime before then, was a thing. It was just extra show floor space. Not entirely. About half of the basement was used for what looked to be badge will call, which is sort of strange to put that in the same room. And that basement is an incredibly low foot traffic area, but I'll get back to that in a second. Now, odds are you won't be familiar with the NAMM booth pricing structure, so I've just pulled up the website here and I'm gonna read you how much a booth costs. Booth space is sold in 100 square foot increments, and 1 square foot costs roughly $38 US, which means just the raw booth space of the smallest booth you can get, a 10 by 10 foot one, smaller wouldn't really make that much sense, will set you back around 4 grand, but that's not it. You have to pay to rent some carpeting from the show if you want any, because that is a lot of stuff to lug from wherever you live to the show, so most exhibitors will choose to rent it from the show. You have to pay for an extension cord, you have to pay if you want a chair at your booth and don't want to bring that from fucking Mexico or Denmark, so many international companies at that show, obviously. And this is not like NAMM show pricing, but obviously going there with either a team of people or just you as an independent builder, you are going to have to pay for flights to get there, and for hotels. Obviously, that's not technically the NAMM show's problem, but that is an expense that is associated with exhibiting at that show, because you have to sleep somewhere, and you have to somehow get there from where you live. That is not competitive pricing with other shows, such as Guitar Summit in Mannheim, Germany. It doesn't really have to be, because NAMM is the big boy flagship event. I'm just saying, that is very, very steep pricing. And this year in particular, a lot of people were very, very unhappy with their booth positioning and just pretty much everything surrounding it. So I'm going to start off with a company that is going to remain anonymous, but that I'm familiar with, and they've sort of messaged me about exactly what their problem was with their NAMM booth this year. They first exhibited at NAMM a couple of years ago. I'm not going to say exactly which year, but they were very disappointed with booth positioning and overall foot traffic and turnout that year, so they didn't come back for the subsequent 1 or 2 shows. And then for the show in 2025, about 10 months prior, their NAMM rep hit them up and said, would you like to renew your registration for 2025? We've got this and that going on, and we can pretty much guarantee you some better booth spacing in a high foot traffic area. Now again, NAMM happened in January of this year, a couple of weeks ago. So this was booked 8, 9, 10 months in advance, pretty much as far in advance as you can go, because it was about as close as possible to the last show. And they were assured better booth positioning, so they booked a 20 by 10 foot booth, which costs roughly $8,200. Now, like I said, that is not the only expense, it's just the only money that goes to the NAMM show is those roughly $8,200. But obviously, a company consisting of 3, 4, 5 people, those people need accommodation, they need to get there somehow, they probably need a rental car to get the stuff from their accommodation to the show and back, they need food, all of that. And they ended up in a low foot traffic area surrounded by 3 walls. One wall behind the booth that was actually just a load-bearing wall of the convention center, and then the walls of 2 other booths around them, which obviously in the back, so they can have like a display and a sign and hang guitars and whatever, will just be a wall. So 1 wall behind, 2 walls in front, and just a walkway in between. Cool. There goes $8,000. I'm not saying the show was a complete disappointment for them or anything, or that nothing was sold off the floor to at least break even. I'm not saying that. I'm saying they were promised good positioning and didn't get it. And the companies that did get way better positioning, for the most part, were not as big as the ones that were completely shafted and shoved in a corner. Another company comes to mind, one that you may even be familiar with from my videos, Kaypro. I swear to God I will at some point learn how to pronounce their name. Now I have to say that what I'm about to say about Kaypro is my observation and not actually something that they said to me, but they were placed in the basement with no option to opt out of that, which, like I said, when you're down there feels more like an HVAC room filled with a bunch of printers and desks and a snack vendor, as opposed to a show floor. The only company that I truly felt deserved to be down there was Aero Band with their Aero guitar. And yes, they were down there. They had a significantly bigger booth than anybody else down there. But I love Kaypro guitars. I'm a big fan of the instruments, and I like the fact that they go to all of these trade shows to get their product into people's hands for them to try, and they were completely shafted with the booth positioning, again with no option to opt out of it. You can't go to the show and say, oh, I would like to be here or whatever. Like, you pay for a booth space of a certain size, and they allocate some place that fits that size. And at that point, you can either say, fuck you, I'm not going, or you can suck it up and you can just make the best of the positioning you got. And another company that comes to mind wasn't even really a company, it was one guy who had 2 prototypes of something that I've never seen before in my life. A self-strumming guitar. This was a really unique product, and while it isn't for everybody, and also due to the fact that this was one guy hand-building prototypes without machinery, the 2 prototypes he had would have cost $12,000 each, but this was really an interesting product, and he got put in the basement with incredibly low foot traffic. In fact, I spoke to a lot of people who didn't know the basement was open that year, like YouTubers who were at the show who said, oh, I thought the basement was closed off like last year. And within that basement, to demo his relatively silent product in comparison to, let's say, a cabinet company, he was put next to a cabinet company, which, if I recall correctly, was called something like Crank Cabinets with a K. Now, this wasn't a bad company, they made cool guitar cabs, absolutely. It was the positioning that absolutely killed that guy's booth, because he was placed right next to people blasting thrash metal through their 4x12 cabinets for the entire duration of the show. And if I had paid even so much as $4,000 for that, let alone 8 or 12 or fuck if I know, I would be so mad. I'm pretty sure I would just charge back and stay home. And this is not all, because I have not touched on the complete lack of security at the show yet. If you're a fan of really, really, really nice things, you might have seen Sully guitars before. Sully makes absolutely fucking incredible instruments, both the imports and the hand-built USA models. Incredible. And Sully had this completely unique one-of-one Flying V stolen off of the show floor on assembly day before the first day of the show, meaning no visitor actually got to see, hold, or play that thing. Now, obviously, this is not Sully's fault. You load your shit into the convention center, and then you leave. Some stuff will get taken home overnight, like if you have a $12,000 prototype for your product, odds are you'll take it back to your hotel room and then bring it back in the morning. But I don't know a single company that was loading and unloading everything every single day, especially if you have like 20 guitars or something. Obviously, whoever stole this guitar from Sully is a terrible person. It's also entirely pointless to do, because this is not a black Fender Stratocaster. This is a unique one-of-one guitar that if anybody ever spots you playing, you will be arrested. You can't list it on Reverb, you will go to prison. You cannot post an Instagram video of you playing it, you will go to prison. The only thing you can do with it, if you're the one who stole it, is sit in your basement and play it and ponder about what a horrible piece of shit you are. But it's not like one Sully was the only thing that was stolen at that show. No. Because just before I started filming this video, I was informed that NAMM Guitars USA, a company from San Francisco that actually, now that I think about it, I'm familiar with, because this yellow guitar that they posted on their Instagram, I played at NAMM 2024 just before closing. I distinctly remember trying this. They were there again this year. I actually didn't see them at all, but according to Sully from Sully Guitars, they had 11 guitars stolen at this year's show. 11. Now, one guitar is a heist that I could pull off. You pull up with a case, you put it in, you act like you're supposed to be there, and you walk out. 11 is not stealthy. 11 needs to either be 5 trips from there to your car, or you need to load 11 guitars onto a cart and pretend you're supposed to be doing that. That is not easy. Or at least it wouldn't be if NAMM had any sort of fucking security in place. But they don't, apparently, because shit gets stolen all of the time, and apparently it's easy to just steal 11 guitars, and there is no security footage of you doing that. Boo-hoo, go home without your guitars, I guess. What, you think I'm joking? Nope. NAMM regrets to inform you that at this year's Winter NAMM 2025 event, all of our guitars that were on display were stolen. NAMM is offering a reward for any information that leads to a conviction and or the return of the guitars. 11 instruments. How do you steal 11 instruments? Was it one person? Was it 11 people? Nobody fucking knows anything. There are cameras in the convention center, you will occasionally spot one, but apparently that's some third-party monitoring system that NAMM doesn't even have access to, and obviously NAMM doesn't own the Anaheim Convention Center, NAMM just rents it out for a week a year. How can you let 11 guitars be stolen from one booth, one high-end, unique one-of-one custom from another booth? I don't know if that's all. I haven't checked if that's all. It probably isn't. Some shit probably gets lost all the time, and there is no security footage of it happening, and you can't expect people to pack up fucking 12 guitars every single night and take them back to a hotel or an Airbnb and then load them in again the next morning before the show floor opens. Nobody does that. Nobody should have to do that, because there should be a camera filming the place. What, am I stupid? And this is not to mention the fact that NAMM sort of lied about a bunch of big guitar companies coming back. Now, not lied directly, but for instance, PRS was supposed to be back. That was announced. I saw no PRS, but then Fender, Gibson, and Marshall was supposed to be back, and the only one that followed through properly on being back was Marshall. They had an amazing booth, it was a great display, they constantly had performances going on by people like Kiki Wong, Fluff, whatever. That shit was awesome. The Marshall booth ruled. I loved it. Fender went upstairs near Yamaha and Engel and ESP and did the same thing that ESP chose to do this year, which is make their place appointment only. Now, for the past years, ESP has been look but don't touch anyway. Like, you could go in the room and the guitars would be harnessed to the wall and you couldn't pick them up and try them, and even if you could have, there was no amp to plug them into, even though Engel was right there. But this year, Fender came back, went appointment only, and ESP chose to follow that apparently, for some fucking reason. I don't understand. I spent about all of 17 minutes upstairs because it's never interesting, because you can never do anything there. The upstairs of NAMM is just the floor for companies that are not paying for the space that they are getting, because NAMM just likes the fact that the big names are on the website again. Also, Gibson didn't have anything. Gibson was supposed to be back. I didn't see a single Gibson guitar at that show. I'm not gonna lie. Except if it was like an amp company that was using Gibsons for you to be able to demo their stuff. Gibson always is a sponsor of the show. Like in past years, I've gotten a Gibson hat as a gift from the show when we went to like creator events or something that were organized by them. So Gibson apparently has a habit of pumping money into that show, but they were not back. There was no booth. Fender wasn't back in the traditional sense, and PRS wasn't back in the first place, because where the fuck was PRS? I didn't see no PRS. So all of this to say, if you're a guitar company, or an amp company, pedal company, if you make anything that potentially could be worth exhibiting at the NAMM show, I recommend taking your $4,000 or $8,000 or $12,000 and investing those across things like sponsoring YouTubers, running ads online, making more product to put out there, investing in distribution, any of the above are better than spending $12,000, of which 8 goes to NAMM, for you to end up in a basement next to crank cabinets trying to show off your silent product to people. I likely will not be back at the next NAMM show at least, probably not the next 2, 3, or 4, because I don't like traveling 12 hours in order to not have fun at a show for 3 days. That should be 4 days so that you actually have time to, like, scout and see everything. Because I was there for business. I run a distribution company, I run a management agency. I was there not to fuck around, but to network and do business. And there is no time for that, because there is no time to even start a conversation if the entire show is 3 days long. What I'm probably going to do instead around that time of year next year is go to Barcelona for ISE, which is another pro audio convention that I've never actually been to but always wanted to see, but never could, because around the time that it happens, I'm still recovering from NAMM jet lag. But I feel like, unless some miracle happens, NAMM is not going to see my face for at least the next 2 years, because it is not worth it for me to spend money going there, and it is not worth it for you as an exhibitor, or as a potential exhibitor, to be one and spend all of that money. That money can be spread out across so many other advertising channels, and if you desperately want to go to a trade show and you're not necessarily, like, from Los Angeles and you don't have a long trip to NAMM, try Guitar Summit. Try something like that. I'm not the biggest fan of the people that run Guitar Summit, but it's cheaper to exhibit at, and it's more worth it for the people. I've heard of so many more people breaking even at Guitar Summit or at smaller trade shows, anything like that, than they have at the NAMM show, because for some reason, you will just get fleeced in favor of companies that are either smaller than you or that are bigger than you and not paying for the major booth space that they're being allocated. Thank you for watching, and good night.